Today is going to be about drawing your hands, drawing your feet, and foreshortening. Hello, 5th grade. Today we're going to break apart probably the 3 hardest things that people find in drawing the human form. And those are hands, feet, and foreshortening. But if we look at some simple tricks and understanding of these parts of drawing, it actually is a little bit easier than we think it is. The hardest thing is that there's foreshortening in any kind of poses that we do with our hands and feet. And foreshortening is a challenge because what you see and what you know are at odds. And this is sort of paving the way in the beginning for our lessons on perspective, which we'll do in 6th and 7th grade from 1 point to 2 point. And it's the idea that as things are further away from us, they start to look smaller even though they really aren't. Conversely, things that are coming towards us are going to look bigger than they actually are. So when you're creating a 2-dimensional representation of a 3-dimensional world and something is coming at you, you have to sort of play around with shutting down your brain saying, well, this is bigger than this, or the proportion of this is different than this, because the proportions get totally thrown out of the water because our perspective is different. So we're going to be laying down a foundation today that is really going to help build a lot of our drawing practice over the next couple of years. We're going to start with foreshortening, which is making things look bigger and they gradually get smaller looking as they go away in space. And this will help us when we do the hands and feet, which, like all drawing, is just breaking things down into simpler shapes. Alright, what we have here is a cylinder. But when the cylinder is facing you, we only see it as a circle. And as it starts to gradually move in your perspective of how you're seeing it, this top part, which we know is a circle, starts turning into an ellipse, which is like an oval. Depending on our perspective, the shapes of things change. And if drawing is just breaking things down into shapes, it's important to understand what those shapes look like when things are going away from us or coming towards us. In perspective, which we'll do next year, you'll see how to make a rectangular prism, but at any given time we're only going to see 3 sides of this, and sometimes 2 sides. So what we're going to be doing this year, because next year we're focused on in geometrical forms, as something is going away from you, it looks like it's getting smaller, and there's mathematical ways of determining those angles. But we're focused more this year on that same concept, but in organic forms, like the human body. So things are gradually getting smaller as they go away from us. And foreshortening just means that the things that are in the foreground, are getting shortened. They look bigger and they're getting shortened. So we know that like an arm is halfway to our knees, but if it's coming at us, we're seeing it more like this form of a cylinder coming at us. Once we can understand this, and kind of shutting down what our brain thinks things look like, it'll become easier to break down the shapes of our hands and our feet. Okay, so Tavish right now is just standing in the shape that we were working on. I'm going to put this piece of acetate, which is kind of dirty, off, but we got our head, shoulder line, spine line, hip line, and then we did these ellipses. So just like in our gesture drawing, We're pretty used to doing this. So it's something like this. Now, Tavish, I would like you to sit down and have your feet come towards us. All right. Now, his legs don't really look so long anymore. So if I put the piece of acetate over, and we'd actually be using the document camera at school right now and doing this with each other. It's a little bit of a big head. Don't move, Tavi. And there's his torso, and there's his hands coming. His feet are actually pretty close to his waist. And then look how shortened his legs are. They're tiny. So that's actually the shape that he is. Now our brain the whole time is going to say, that's not what's going on. Feet are far away from the waist. Legs are long. But it's not what we're seeing. And if we break that down just into the shapes that we're seeing, that's the foreshortening. Now, that's a perfect place that he's sitting in right now, because we can think about those little ellipses. All right, so stay really still, Tavish. There's his head. There's the shoulder line. This is just regular. And then that front of his arm. You know where the radius and ulna bones are. And then one limb is coming out like this, one limb's coming out like this. And then the front part of his leg, the bottom part of his leg, is crossing over. So then we have this sort of a shape. And we can't always just put a piece of plastic or acetate over the forms that we see. But once we start to see that they're just broken down in simple shapes that we can all draw, they're just shapes that our brains don't believe. Let's look at this with some really extreme foreshortening, where his hands are coming straight at us. So hands. Let's break down our hands into shapes. We have kind of a diamond shape for the palm of our hand, and our carpals, metacarpals, and our metacarpal phalanges will be broken into 3 spots. These are all the places where our joints move and bend. And then our wrist. So if we break our hand down into these simple 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 pieces, we have a pretty good understanding of how to make like a gesture drawing of the hands. So let's try this on paper. So the nice thing about drawing hands is that you always have a model around with you that works for free. So it's not like getting your brothers and sisters or pets to pose for gesture drawings. You have that model right there. So let me do the shapes that I've done in the hand. Got that. Diamond for the thumb, 2 pieces, carpals, metacarpal phalanges. Now, if I draw around the sides of it, like I did with my gesture drawings, I have a hand. This is pretty simple. Now, if we're just drawing a hand like that, that's kind of easy. When we're doing different poses like grasping things, now we're starting to deal with that concept of foreshortening, which is why we did foreshortening first. Okay. We want to think of every single, the carpals, metacarpals, and the metacarpal phalanges as being, each one of them being this. So 1, 2, 3. And so when you're in any different pose, some of them might be coming right at us where others are at angles. So that's what we're going to think of, that our hands are made up of little cylinders. So let's draw a pose that's like this. We start off with our diamond, this muscle right here for our thumb. It's the thumb. And now we're going to work on our index finger. The first one is just coming up straight like a cylinder. The second one is a little bit foreshortened. And the third part of it is coming right at us. So I'm going darker with my value of the line so it looks like it's coming forward. The next one, the middle finger, which you know where it is. That's regular. The middle one is coming right at us. We barely even see it. And the next one is kind of coming down. Ring finger. Coming at us, coming down, noticing where it is in relation to our palm, and then a little pinky. Now, when I go over my lines, voila, we know how to draw hands. So you can practice that in whatever kind of poses. If you're right-handed, unfortunately, your left hand's going to be put to work. But that's where you can have other people kind of pose for you, or even taking a picture and then drawing from that, because then once you've already taken a three-dimensional world and flattened it out, it makes it a little bit easier to see what those shapes are. So if we just break it into all of these shapes of our hand, everything will be a lot easier. So instead of getting overwhelmed by being like, oh, I know that a hand looks like this and here's my fingers, and then it kind of looks like some weird kind of sea coral, we're breaking it down into those organic shapes, kind of thinking of each piece as a little cylinder. I'd like you to try at least, I don't know, 3, 4, however many you want to, 5 drawings of hands in different poses. This is, again, kind of a practice week. Let's try a fist. We're just breaking this right down, right? There's our basic diamond. Also looking at relationships. The top of the thumb is over there, and the bottom of that index finger goes in like this. So we go over the edges. And there we go. And whenever we want something to look like it's coming closer to us, you can get a little bit darker with your line value. And that'll make things look like they're closer. What if it's like a side view? Let's try that. Again, starting off with that shape here. It really is a diamond, but a little bit thinner on this side. See a pointer finger, thumb, and these fingers back here, which I'm not really seeing what they're doing, but that's okay. We know they're there, we just don't have to draw them. And that's one of those times to show what's in front. Okay, so in real life, you see these fingers aren't covered in thicker lines than these ones. It's just the representation we're using in drawing. Remember, lines don't exist. We only use them to represent things. There's just values and planes meeting each other. But they certainly help in drawing. And feet are even easier. Let's start off with the bottom of our femur. We have our tarsals, metatarsals, and metatarsal phalanges. So many bones in the feet. And the muscle that we see in the back, we see a little bit of the gastrocnemius muscle on either side. When we draw this foot, this is ankle bones, we're really just breaking this down into a triangle and an ellipse. But if we know that the foot is a triangle, it's really going to help us completely in drawing it. Foreshortened toes. And there, we have a foot that's coming forward. If we want to put a shoe on it, there. But it's all sort of coming from a triangular shape. Now, the side view. Again, so we have, sorry, not femur, this was the tibia. So you have the tibia and fibula at the bottom part, and bone-wise, tarsals, metatarsals, metatarsal phalanges, and that gastrocnemius. So when we trace around that side, we get a foot. And again, just like it was a triangle here, this shape with the foot going to the side is also a triangle. Let's start putting some shoes on these. Okay, let's do the front one as a sneaker. So that's that tibia and fibula and the gastrocnemius muscle. And we're just doing a triangle there. Now, if we start drawing some laces, and this is going to be a project in 6th grade, drawing sneaker seems easy, but they're simple, so it becomes a little bit harder because you have to sort of get it right. And the tongue of the sneaker. But foreshorten, this is about what it's coming out and looking like. Let's try a side view with a heel. Now this is going to change things quite a bit. Tibia, fibula. Now in a heel, and if you've ever tried to draw high heels and you get this sort of thing and they don't quite look right, this is because we're actually working off two triangles. So these tarsals, metatarsals, and metatarsal phalanges are kind of doing this strange bend here. This is also why wearing heels very frequently can shorten this gastrocnemius muscle, and therefore when then your foot is flat, that muscle can have a lot of, because it's shortened, can pinch into a nerve. It's called plantar fasciitis. You got to keep those gastrocnemius muscles stretched. But this is really what's going on there. So what we're going to do is it's a triangle facing down, kind of an isosceles, and then another triangle like this. So when we're drawing around it, the heel, so there we go. So it's not like this. But it's the same thing when people draw feet and they say, ah, foot's like this, and you get that Smurf foot. It's not actually what we're looking at. We're actually looking at a shape that's more of a triangle with this area right here. And depending how big your arch is, some people have very flat feet, some people have very high arches. But this is what we're looking at. And when we look down at our feet, we tend to think that they are smaller than they are because they're far away from us. So it's still more of your brain playing tricks on you. We don't have much cause to draw our feet at this angle, so it's not quite the triangle angle, but this is generally how we end up seeing our feet. Looking down. We don't really, and then our leg would be, and that is my knee, leg would be foreshortened down. But we tend not to have a whole lot of occasion to draw our feet in this angle. But remember, they are as big as our forearm. There's my forearm. Whoop. See if we can manage this. There's my foot. So all of your feet are going to be from your wrist to your elbow, which is part of our proportions. But when you're drawing feet, if you want to draw them from the front, toes become little circles, ankles, looking like that. So it is this triangle shape. And then from the side, again, triangle shape. So it's actually quite a bit easier than our hands. Our hands are broken up into these shapes, but our feet we can just kind of work off having the triangle. And then understanding that foreshortening is going to help as well, because when things are coming at you, you can see how they're shortened into this kind of a shape that isn't what you think of them in your head. Alright, so we've done hands and feet and some foreshortening practice. What I'd like you to do with this is do about three, 4 examples minimum of different poses of hands, different poses of feet, and some gesture drawings that there is some foreshortening. This is helpful too if you draw like people who are like flying at you. In school you would just lie, we'd have people lie on the tables and we'd do it from the different angles. But try out some different examples of foreshortening. Try out some hands, try out some feet. This is all just practice. So it's all coming from those gesture drawings you were doing. And the more practice you do with this and the more that you're able to say, you know what, brain, you have an idea of what these things look like, a schema, but it's time as our brains are developing to have a more grown-up approach to, instead of just this symbol of what a hand or a foot looks like, to actually break it down into those shapes of what we're seeing. So this is a lot of believing your eyes and ignoring the symbols and schema that your brain has for what things look like. This is a big time for a big jump into accurate drawing. And if you don't do it right now, it's harder to learn as an adult, and it's why so many adults have trouble drawing people, because they never really went forth from those schemas that they learned when they weren't worried about making things look accurate. So now is the time to really practice that.